Currently, industry data shows that a staggering 85% of global pharmaceutical leaders rank artificial intelligence adoption as an urgent priority. Yet, 83% of industry professionals consider the technology overrated, noting that most clinical pilots stall out before ever reaching scale. Procurement teams frequently attempt to qualify these dynamic, probabilistic algorithms using the same static IT vendor checklists designed for traditional software. Evaluating an algorithm with the wrong rubric yields a severe domain mismatch. The result exposes life sciences organizations to unmeasured compliance gaps and patient safety risks. Traditional software logic is deterministic. Static code yields a highly predictable output. Algorithms are probabilistic. Unstructured clinical data navigates complex neural networks, yielding multiple potential pathways. Safely deploying this requires evaluating the algorithm not as an application, but as a controlled system. A rigorous due diligence framework anchors the model within existing regulatory axioms. That means enforcing GxP alignment, proving data provenance, and establishing strict liability barriers. True compliance relies on engineering a specialized validation architecture, constructed methodically across 3 distinct tiers. This blueprint visualization begins at the bottom tier, the data foundation. In a regulated pharmaceutical environment, garbage in, garbage out is a direct regulatory violation. Raw data ingestion must be strictly controlled. Generic foundational models routinely fail life sciences tasks. Processing unstructured internet data without clinical context generates severe hallucination risks. To solve this, training data must pass through a rigid Alcoa filter. Every data point ingested must be attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, and accurate. During procurement, vendors must provide mathematical proof that their training datasets meet these exact integrity standards. An unverified foundation permanently corrupts any downstream clinical prediction, rendering the entire system invalid. IBM's Watson for Oncology serves as a clear historical baseline. The platform was heavily marketed as a universally applicable solution for cancer treatment. However, the system's training data was exceedingly narrow. It relied on synthetic cases generated almost exclusively from a single prestigious institution. Lacking diverse, real-world data, the model failed to generalize to broader patient demographics. It generated treatment recommendations that clinicians flagged as erroneous and unsafe. This failure establishes an immediate procurement requirement. Buyers must demand comprehensive bias audits and demographic coverage summaries for their vendors' training data. Lacking clinical diversity in the training set creates an algorithmic blind spot, one but vendor marketing often disguises as universal intelligence. This animated visualization represents the middle tier of our architecture, mapping out a blank confusion matrix to evaluate performance. Consider a standard vendor claim. Our algorithm achieves 99% accuracy in screening for adverse events. Pharmacovigilance datasets suffer severe class imbalance. Out of 1,000 records, 990 represent normal outcomes, while only 10 represent an adverse event. If an algorithm blindly guesses normal every time, it mathematically achieves 99% accuracy, yet the 10 critical adverse events remain entirely undetected. Relying on context-blind base accuracy hides the system's failure to catch the minority class. Vendors must instead be forced to report balanced metrics. Measurements like F1 scores, area under the ROC curve, and specifically recall prove the system is actively targeting those rare events. Procurement teams must codify acceptable error thresholds, defining the absolute maximum allowable false negatives before signing any contract. Accepting generalized accuracy metrics in life sciences actively disguises patient risk and subverts regulatory oversight. At the center of this middle tier sits the algorithmic black box itself. Federal Software as a Medical Device frameworks and GAMP5 standards dictate that all computerized systems must be proven fit for intended use. An opaque model fails this specific regulatory test. When making high-stakes clinical or diagnostic decisions, the logic driving the output cannot be hidden. Currently, 65% of regulatory professionals distrust algorithms for generating compliance documentation, entirely due to the risks of untraceable hallucinations. The solution requires mandating explainability frameworks, such as SHAP or LIME, in vendor proposals. The algorithm must draw a traceable line directly from its output back to the specific source document. Clinical trust requires unbroken, verifiable transparency back to the source data. This brings us to the top tier of our blueprint: contractual safeguards. A traditional tech SaaS contract caps liability and retains training rights, contrasting sharply with the secure requirements of a pharma-grade agreement. Standard tech contracts present a massive danger. They attempt to limit the vendor's liability for model outputs, while simultaneously claiming rights to use customer prompts to train future iterations. If a scientist injects proprietary molecular formulas or protected health information into a vendor's generative model, the resulting intellectual property and HIPAA vulnerabilities are immense. Contracts must enforce strict prompt data segregation, prohibiting the vendor from using client data for external fine-tuning. Service-level agreements must also evolve, tying directly to clinical performance metrics and triggering financial penalties if precision drops over time. You must invert the standard tech liability model. The vendor must bear the financial and legal risk for their algorithmic errors. With data, metrics, and contracts secured, the complete AI vendor validation architecture shifts from static procurement to continuous lifecycle monitoring. Validating an algorithm in the pharmaceutical sector is not a one-time checkbox exercise. European regulatory guidelines emphasize this shift, requiring transparency, human oversight, and active governance across the entire product lifespan. Algorithms experience model drift. As real-world patient data and clinical protocols naturally evolve, the system's predictive performance degrades. Maintaining compliance requires automated, dynamic monitoring dashboards designed to track the model's precision long after deployment. Forcing vendors into a controlled system framework neutralizes the marketing hype surrounding algorithmic tools. The primary defenses are strict: enforce Alcoa Plus data audits, demand context-aware sensitivity metrics, and rewrite standard tech liabilities. Executing this level of due diligence relies on a permanent cross-disciplinary alliance between IT, quality assurance, regulatory affairs, and clinical data scientists. By adhering precisely to this foundational framework, life science manages. In the high-stakes environment of drug development, rigorous adherence to first principles remains the ultimate defense.